Hello, today we're getting our news from CNN as I was deciding to make an extra report for my birthday and I decided to torture myself with this. So let's see what they have to say. What is Antifa? Let's start by watching this video, shall we?
And joining me now is Pulitzer Prize winning author Douglas Blackman. He's an expert on U.S. race relations and a senior fellow at the University of Virginia's Miller Center. We appreciate you joining us. Thanks for coming in.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
You know, I was just talking to you before we came to you, and it was interesting. You actually live just steps away from where all of this happened, so you're the perfect person to give us some context as to why hateful people gather at this location in Charlottesville, Virginia. Why Charlottesville?
You know, there are a lot of cities around the country right now that are struggling with this question around Confederate monuments and what to do with them. It began with the Confederate battle flag. As long as 25 years ago, the state of Mississippi had a vote over whether to take down take the Confederate battle emblem out of the state flag. So this has been going on for a long time, but has now turned into this struggle over monuments, in particular in a bunch of cities. Charlottesville is actually the smallest of them probably, but New Orleans has taken down several monuments. Dallas is dealing with this. Richmond, Virginia, a number of other places. But the reason that the alt-right has come to Charlottesville it may surprise some people, but it has to do with it because what they're really looking for is just exactly this kind of a showdown, a violent showdown, but they wanted it to be with white liberal progressives. They wanted to be in the streets in a struggle, not in a place like New Orleans or even Richmond, Virginia, where the people on the other side would have been mostly African Americans, and the explicit racist nature of all of this would have been very obvious.
So they knew that there would be counter protests, that people would come out to counter what they were saying.
They wanted to
possibly have violence.
They wanted to be in a classic college town where they would get in a giant scrum with a lot of college kids and white liberals, because in some sense I think they must think that it deracializes, makes it less obvious that what they're really about is just old-fashioned KKK, bigotry, Nazism, white supremacy. That's all this is about. It's not patriotism. It's just a racial fight.
Got it. Do you think some people, the media maybe, or some GOP lawmakers are being too tough on President Trump? Or do you see that people have become emboldened to go out to the streets and, you know, show off their racist views?
I don't think that we can necessarily attribute all of this to the election of Donald Trump. Now, I think we probably can attribute the election of Donald Trump partly to that there has been this ferment of this kind of activity in recent years. We saw it through part of the Tea Party movement. We saw it in some of the opposition to President Obama. So who's responsible for all of this having started may be a little harder to identify. But there is absolutely no doubt that these forces in our society, and they're still relatively small, they just look terribly big at times like this, but they're relatively small. But there's no doubt that they have been emboldened by an atmosphere that President Trump has gone along with, and that he has been relatively inadequate in his response to the events of the last 24 hours.
And what do you make of President Trump calling for unity, yet not saying what the United States should rally against, not naming what we should be united against?
Frankly, it's a bit shocking, even if you try to give the president benefit of the doubt on this. It is good that he made some statements that said that he's opposed to hatred of all kinds and that there shouldn't be violence. That's all true. But the suggestion that somehow the folks who were opposed to the Nazi white supremacist ralliers, those activists, the idea that somehow what they were doing was the equivalent of what the Nazis were doing is crazy on its face. But also, once you get to the point that someone has deliberately crashed a car into a crowd, an ISIS-style terrorist attack, it's pretty simple at that point. This is something that merits a complete, unequivocal denunciation, and it's really, it's disappointing that the president didn't even see the political utility of being very clear and very unequivocal about that, even as all of his Republican allies have come out and made such extraordinarily stronger statements.
Even though this is not a political issue, this is just a human issue. Douglas Blackman, we're going to leave it there. Appreciate you joining us. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Alright, let's move on to the article itself. Story highlights. A controversial protest group known as Antifa clashed with right-wingers in Charlottesville. Some members employ radical or militant tactics to get their message across. CNN. After protests in Charlottesville, Virginia turned violent on Saturday, leaving one person dead and dozens injured. The world is still grappling with what happened, who was involved and why. Hundreds of white nationalists took to the streets over the weekend to protest the removal of a General Robert E. Lee statue. But members of a controversial opposing group known as Antifa also showed up to condemn hate and racism. Here's a look at Antifa protesters who have become more visible in the past year. What is Antifa? Antifa is short for anti-fascists. The term is used to define a broad group of people whose political beliefs lean towards the left, often the far left, but do not conform with the Democratic Party platform. The group doesn't have an official leader or headquarters, although groups in certain states hold regular meetings. Antifa positions can be hard to define, but many members support oppressed populations and protests the amassing of wealth by corporations and elites. Some employ radical or militant tactics to get their message across. Scott Crow, a longtime Antifa organizer, says the radical ideas promoted by Antifa are starting to be adopted by liberals. They would never have looked at those ideals before, because they saw us as the enemy as much as the right-wingers. The majority of Antifa members don't fall into a stereotype since the election of President Donald Trump. However, most new Antifa members are young voters. How did the group start? The exact origins of the group are known, but Antifa can be traced to Nazi Germany and anti-fascist action, a militant group founded in the 1980s in the United Kingdom. Modern-day members of Antifa have become more active in making themselves known at public rallies and within the Progressive Monument, said Brian Levin, director of the Center for Study of Hate and Extremism at the University of California, San Bernardino. What they're trying to do now is not only become prominent through violence at these high-profile rallies, but also to reach out through small meetings and through social networking to cultivate disfranchised progressives who heretofore were peaceful, Levin said. Where do they protest? Members have been spotted at high-profile right-wing events across the country, including Milo Yiannopoulos' appearance at the University of California, Berkeley, in February. They also protested President Trump's inauguration in January. While it can be difficult to distinguish Antifa activists from other protesters, some members dress head to toe in black. Members call this the Black Bloc. They also wear masks to hide their identities from the police and whomever they are protesting. Why are they controversial? The group is known for causing damage to property during protests. In Berkeley, black-clad protesters wearing masks threw Molotov cocktails and smashed windows at the Student Union Center, where the Yiannopoulos event was to be held. Crow said members use violence as a means of self-defense, and they believe property destruction does not equate to violence. There is a place for violence. Is that the world we want to live in? No. Is it the world we want to inhabit? No. Is it the world we want to create? No. But will we push back? Yes, Crow said. Levin Antifa activists feel the need to partake in violence because they believe that elites controlling the government and the media, so they need to make statement head-on against the people who they regard as racist. There's this "it's going down" mentality and this hit them with your boots mentality that goes back many decades to confront that took place not only here in the American South, but also in places like Europe, he added. White nationalists and members of the so-called alt-right have denounced members of Antifa, sometimes calling them the alt-left. Many white nationalists from the Charlottesville rallies claimed it was the Antifa groups that led the protests to turn violent. Peter Schwetanovic, a University of Nevada, Reno student who attended to the Virginia protests over the weekend, said he believes the far left, including Antifa, are just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than the right wing could ever be. These are the people who would preach tolerance and love while at the same time threatening people with different political ideology. We go to our rallies and they harass us and attack us, but they held theirs and we ignore them. You don't see right-wing protests get like this, Shetanovic told CNN affiliate KRNV. But Crow said the philosophy of Antifa is based on the idea of direct action. The idea in Antifa is that we go where they, right-wingers, go. That hate speech is not free speech. That if you are endangering people with what you say and the actions that are behind them, then you do not have the right to do that. And so we go to cause conflict, to shut them down where they are. Because we don't believe that Nazis or fascists of any stripe should have a mouthpiece. CNN's Sarah Ganim contributed to this report, and the report was written in August 14, 2017 by Jessica Sureff, CNN. Alright, so this is quite a big confusing article as it's pretty recent, but I have tried to listen to it through different kinds of sources to try to get some perception of it, because it's really confusing. Normally you do hear about the Antifa showing up, attacking people, and really making it a violent scene. Because, well, they're domestic terrorists, and as you even heard in this article, this guy is stating, is that they admit that they use direct force. They justify them attacking people because they don't believe that people should have right to speak of their right-wing ideas or whatever they're gonna call it, Nazi and fascists. And they don't think that domestic terrorism, attacking property, etc., is also okay, because it does not include violence or incite violence, etc. But it really does, and they have attacked countless of people. I mean, even just poor girls that's standing right next to the Berkeley thing, pulling their hair. It's ridiculous. And in this rally, there was a lot of people throwing chemicals, like really backfiring towards others, and it was like the reporters there could not even see. The scene was crazy, but I heard from the actual guy that set this whole thing up. It was supposed to be called Unite the Right. So basically, they tried to get into the park where they were supposed to hold a speech, but it was very difficult for them to go and hold a rally at all. And all of this other stuff happened at some other location, from what he explained. And that's where the Nazis, white supremacists, or whatever you want to call them, clashed with the Antifa. And as you probably understood, there was multiple factions. And some have reported that George Soros was behind almost every single one of these disrupting groups, from the far right and the far left. And it's funny, the hypocrisy that these so-called communist Antifa, or whatever they want to call themselves, anti-fascist action, anti-fascist, no matter what time genre of the anti-fascist they're gonna be, they are being supported by one of the most wealthy and influential speculants in the world, George Soros. it's interesting to see if this is gonna backfire on George Soros, because people are calling out that he should be jailed for this, he should be prosecuted. Because if he's funding these groups to come at this meeting and disrupt each other, etc., and people come up to reporters and even say that they are paid protesters, they are paid to go out there from the beginning. And then people just have these violent clashes. It's disturbing, but that's the real truth. And this thing has been going on since forever. And also, journalists from, for example, InfoWars and many others, they came into these rallies to report on this, but they were attacked because the cops led them basically in to the rallies where the protesters were. And then they got attacked by the Antifa that were just there waiting for them. It's like it's all organized how they are gonna come in there and get attacked. And those peaceful so-called liberals, demonstrators, etc., whatever they want to call themselves, counter-protesters, they were like, running up to CNN and saying, these horrible right-wing fascists, Nazis, they came and attacked. It's like sick, really. It's like mind games. And they're constantly trying to fool the public. But I must digress. George Soros is to blame. I mean, he funds these over and over again, and it leads to violence, terrorism, and one death in this rally.
By now, I'm sure you've all heard about what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia over the weekend. After a day of chaos and agitation, a reported neo-Nazi rammed a car into a crowded Black Lives Matter and Antifa protest, killing one woman and injuring at least 19 others. It's horrifying. Now, details are still coming out about the suspect, as I'm sure they will continue to do over the coming days and weeks. But for now, we know he's being held on suspicion of second-degree murder, multiple counts of malicious wounding, and leaving the scene of an accident. Our reporter Faith Goldie was there, reporting live. She had just crossed the street before the car came barreling down it. Her footage and the information she gave to the police will help to convict the killer. She was nearly killed herself, but our political enemies see this carnage and death as an opportunity to attack us before the final count of the injured and dead was even tallied. Here is the Alberta Finance Minister, Joe Ceci, using a death for political expediency. Joe Ceci tweeted, "Those who fan racism's flames, like the rebel, have no place in our society." And then here is Economic Development and Trade Minister Darren Billis, somehow linking me and our thousands of supporters to a neo-Nazi in Virginia. He tweeted, "I unequivocally denounce the racism and hatred in Charlottesville. Anyone who feels the same should denounce the rebel, period." And here is United Conservative leadership candidate Doug Schweitzer, fighting for NDP voters by using the political violence and death to attack us for defending the First Amendment rights of all Americans, even those we find utterly reprehensible. Schweitzer tweeted, "Just watched the rebel feed from Charlottesville. Absolutely wrong. You can't give them a pass." Now, is he talking about neo-Nazis? No, he's talking about us. And then he tags in Jason Kenney and Brian Jean to, what? Telling us for reporting live what we saw? What kind of fevered and deranged mind does one have to have rolling around inside their skull to see that video we all saw of a woman being murdered in real time, right in front of the entire world, and say, how do I use this to attack my political critics half a world away? A woman is dead. She's dead. And the NDP are using this to attack the free press and future fourth place finisher Doug Schweitzer. The Michael Chong of Alberta is using it to appeal to the NDP base and liberal house husbands like Scott Gilmore. Schweitzer's actually using the death of this poor woman to try to become the next Alison Redford, cheered on by old PC cronies who see Doug as their only way back into power. It is one of the most disgusting and vile things I've ever seen in my lifetime in politics. What kind of mental gymnastics do these opportunistic ghouls have to do to accuse a Jewish-owned and run pro-Israel network full of Jews and other Zionists like me of sympathizing with the Nazi cause? Have you ever heard of anything so stupid? I mean, let's all just stop and appreciate that the NDP is the party of BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. against Jewish-run companies, and they're calling me hateful, that's pretty damn rich. Worse still, there are people out there who will, of course, readily believe the lies because they just couldn't be bothered to watch the other side.
It's quite known that Antifa loves to hit women. They really love to attack women, especially good-looking ones, because the better-looking one you are, the most likely you're not with Antifa. And even women that are lefties and are with the Antifa group, etc., have been attacked by other Antifa because they look, you know, pretty attractive, some of them. And of course they're gonna think, oh, that's a bloody conservative fascist scum. So they have to attack them because you see these feminists, etc. They look like, I don't know, blue-haired, pierced on their tongues with hair in their armpits. They look like, I don't know, disgusting. And of course it's tragic what happened with the car, but people jump to the conclusions that it was right-winged people that did it. And in some other report I heard it was a black woman that did it. Whatever the story is, I don't know. But I think what people should do is a thorough investigation, because that vehicle did not even have a license plate on it, from what I heard. So it's very baffling to me that people immediately knows who it is. And also it is very known that George Soros and other groups like these have been founded to be just a stunt group, portraying as a right group, etc. Some people are just paid protesters and their entire organizations to cause violence, to cause hatred. Like I heard about a group in Oklahoma that's right-wing, and they're all sponsored just to make sure that people will be afraid of right-winged extremism. And it is a fact that people should take into consideration and investigate it properly. And something we should also consider is that when people have masks, have their entire body covered in black, the Antifa, for example, they're not protecting their identities because they're afraid of an authoritarian government. They're afraid to show their faces because they know they're about to commit terrorist acts. And it's very known that if you remove a mask of an Antifa, they will go berserk. They will either try to flee, they will either go hysterical and stand and scream, or else they will try to knock you the fuck out. They're crazy. These are not peaceful people by any sense. Sadly, the value of discussion is gone. And it's a terrible price we had to pay with openness and freedom. But I hope that common sense will come back and bring an enlightening to our freedom and hopefully save it before it will be dispersed with and transformed in some malevolent totalitarian ideology, mainly known as technocracy, globalism, the New World Order's pet project. And I mean, this George Soros, he has broken down more than 100 governments and regimes, making financial collapses, etc. It's crazy the amount of things he has done during his lifespan. I mean, it's a guy you're supposed to hate, but as much as I hate him, he's a quite impressive man. It's extraordinary. He really had a great life, doing terrible things, of course. I mean, still, I hate him, but you can't deny someone, no matter how terrible they are, that what they have done is something quite extraordinary, powerful. Same as any other totalitarian, which these so-called Antifa are. If you listen to them, because they clearly call out that they are the only ones that are allowed to speak, and all the others should fall in line, otherwise they will get silenced and beaten up. That, to me, sounds a lot like terrorism. And yes, they in fact do admit this even on their own homepage, where they're gonna say that they are pouring cement into train tracks, they are standing on railroad tracks, even with their own bodies, telling people, you know, you can't come to this station, you can't come and hold free speeches. But like that Peter guy said in the article, they come after the right's rallies, but the right doesn't come after their rallies. So what the big problem here is not the protests themselves, but the counter-protests. If they would be able to speak freely for the day, then they would go home. The Antifa could come some other day and hold counterpoints or something else, because it simply doesn't work when people are so thick that they can't even have a discussion. It's not like the old days where you could have a discussion on the street, even publicly in your job, without getting attacked, harassed, or getting fired, or having to worry that someone will get hurt. Politics should be discussed openly. The only one that will prosper through a closed-mind society where no one will be able to dare express any opinion of their political views is only empowering a totalitarian government that will just censor anyone that says anything differently, and they will just grow and grow in power until you will lose your freedoms. And that's what's constantly happening with Google and nowadays. But more on to this article, because there's basically thousands of different subjects linked to these things. So we're gonna stick to the Antifa line here. And then we have these far-right groups, right? They're pissed off that people are taking away statues, and, you know, they're basically trading away history. They even decided to take out Confederate monuments and stuff in a museum. I mean, in a museum, so they only have from the north, not the south. That's insane. I mean, if you take away history, it's like Orwellian all of a sudden. It's like they're gonna say, there was never a South, there was never racism, it was only openness. It's just sick. If you remove history, then you will be condemned to repeat it. You have to have the Confederate statues and monuments. It's like saying that the Second World War never happened. And if you're gonna remove Hitler museums, etc., which are gonna represent the Nazi Germany, etc., then you are removing a piece of history. And if there will ever be a dictator like Hitler ever again, then it will be those people that decided to remove the history, because they have removed a crucial evidence of a dangerous past. And it is same with communism and the Nazis and the fascists and all of these extreme groups, theology, Islam, etc. If you try to use moral relativism to predict a different story rather than the actual ones that they had, then you're going down a dangerous route, because you're deceiving a massive amount of people. Because I've seen Nazis, leftists, socialists, communists, whatever they want to call themselves, fascists, and people that says that Islam is nice, and Muslims themselves that has no clue of what totalitarian ideologies these are. And yes, there's lots of them. But these labels are there for a good reason. And you perhaps should read up on what they actually mean. Because these Antifa are the most closely related to the fascists, in fact. Because they have a great resemblance with the communists. They both attacked people with different ideological opinion. If you remember the communists, they stormed down Tsar Nikolaus, they took people to mines and shot them, and including the Tsar himself, who was denied asylum in Great Britain. And you always hear about stories about Hitler, so, you know, let's not repeat history 1,000 times over, because the mainstream media does that way too well, and including our propaganda schools. So we all know that Hitler did things like this, but Hitler wasn't a nationalist, he was more towards the socialist. And the fascist was the Spanish, it was the Italians, etc. It came from Mussolini. It was also power grabbing, but they were more towards a right-winged approach. I haven't read too much about the fascists to know for certain exactly their policies, etc., like I have in communism and Islam, for example, and a little bit about Nazi, not like as thorough I have with communism and Islam. The thing people seem to neglect is that all of these things should be denounced, which Trump did denounce. He said all who committed violent attacks, and of course racism was the thing he pointed out.
Why did you wait so long for the last neo-Nazi?
I didn't wait long. I didn't wait long. I didn't wait long. I wanted to make sure, unlike most politicians, that what I said was correct, not make a quick statement. The statement I made on Saturday, the first statement, was a fine statement, but you don't make statements that direct unless you know the fact. It takes a little while to get the facts. You still don't know the facts. And it's a very, very important process to me, and it's a very important statement. So I don't want to go quickly and just make a statement for the sake of making a political statement. I want to know the facts. If you go back to my, in fact, I brought it. As I said on, remember this, Saturday, we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. And then I went on from there. Now, here's the thing, as to, excuse me, take it nice and easy. Here's the thing. When I make a statement, I like to be correct. I want the facts. This event just happened. In fact, a lot of the event didn't even happen yet as we were speaking. This event just happened. Before I make a statement, I need the facts. So I don't want to rush into a statement. So making the statement when I made it was excellent. In fact, the young woman, who I hear is a fantastic young woman, and it was on NBC, her mother wrote me and said, through, I guess, Twitter, social media, the nicest things, and I very much appreciated that. I hear she was a fine, really actually an incredible young woman, but her mother on Twitter thanked me for what I said. And honestly, if the press were not fake, and if it was honest, the press would have said what I said was very nice. But unlike you and unlike the media, before I make a statement, I like to know the facts. They don't. Listen, how about a couple of infrastructure questions?
Was that terrorism?
Say it, what?
CEO of Walmart said you missed a critical opportunity to help bring the country together. Did you?
Not at all. I think the country, look, you take a look. I've created over 1 million jobs since I'm president. The country is booming. The stock market is setting records. We have the highest employment numbers we've ever had in the history of our country. We're doing record business. We have the highest levels of enthusiasm. So the head of Walmart, who I know, who's a very nice guy, was making a political statement. I mean, ask him how he's doing. I do it the same way, and you know why? Because I want to make sure, when I make a statement, that the statement is correct. And there was no way of making a correct statement that early. I had to see the facts, unlike a lot of reporters. I didn't know David Duke was there. I wanted to see the facts. And the facts, as they started coming out, were very well stated. In fact, everybody said his statement was beautiful. If he would have made it sooner, that would have been good. I couldn't have made it sooner because I didn't know all of the facts. Frankly, people still don't know all of the facts. It was very important, excuse me. It was very important to me to get the facts out, and correctly, because if I would have made a fast statement, and the first statement was made without knowing much other than what we were seeing. The second statement was made after, with knowledge, with great knowledge. There's still things, there's still things that people don't know. I want to make a statement with knowledge. I wanted to know the facts. Okay.
Two questions. Was this terrorism? And can you tell us how you're feeling about your chief strategist?
Well, I think the driver of the car is a disgrace to himself, his family, and this country. And that is, you can call it terrorism. You can call it murder. You can call it whatever you want. I would just call it as the fastest one to come up with a good verdict. That's what I'd call it. Because there is a question. Is it murder? Is it terrorism? And then you get into legal semantics. The driver of the car is a murderer. And what he did was a horrible, horrible, inexcusable thing. I've already done it. I did it the last time.
He called on it again, linking this
Senator McCain?
to the alt-right. And
Senator
saying
McCain, you
he's-
mean the one who
yes.
voted against Obamacare?
And he said
Who
that
is Senator? You mean Senator McCain who voted against us getting good health care?
McCain
Yeah.
said that the alt-right is behind these attacks, and he linked that same group to those who perpetrated the attack in Charlottesville.
Well, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm sure Senator McCain must know what he's talking about. But when you say the alt-right, define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying, as
No,
Senator,
define it for me. Come on, let's go. Define
Senator
it for me.
McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at him? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
This is Senator McCain's statement.
Let me ask you this. What about the fact that they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. I'm not finished, fake news. That was a horrible day. I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have, you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent. Go ahead.
Do you think that what you call the alt-left is the same as neo-Nazis?
Those people, all of those people, excuse me, I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. Those people were also there because they wanted to protest the taking down of a statue, Robert E. Lee. So, excuse me, and you take a look at some of the groups and you see, and you know it if you were honest reporters, which in many cases you're not, but many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So, this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop? But they were there to protest, excuse me, you take a look the night before, they were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. Infrastructure question, go ahead.
Should statues of Robert E. Lee stay up?
I would say that's up to a local town, community, or the federal government, depending on where it is located.
Are you against the Confederacy?
About race relations in America, and do you think things have gotten worse or better since you took office?
I think they've gotten better or the same. Look, they've been frayed for a long time, and you can ask President Obama about that because he'd make speeches about it. But I believe that the fact that I've brought in, it will be soon, millions of jobs. You see where companies are moving back into our country. I think that's going to have a tremendous positive impact on race relations. We have companies coming back into our country. We have 2 car companies that just announced. We have Foxconn in Wisconsin just announced. We have many companies, I say, pouring back into the country. I think that's going to have a huge positive impact on race relations. You know why? It's jobs. What people want now, they want jobs. They want great jobs with good pay. And when they have that, you watch how race relations will be. And I'll tell you, we're spending a lot of money on the inner cities. We're fixing the inner cities. We're doing far more than anybody's done with respect to the inner cities. It's a priority for me, and it's very important.
Mr. President, are you putting what you're calling the alt-left and white supremacists on the same moral plane?
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
Mr. President,
both sides, sir? You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Kill the person. Heather hired
Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville
Excuse me.
to protest.
Excuse me. They didn't put themselves down as neo, and you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
White nationalists?
Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now, we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
Treated unfairly, sir. I'm sorry. I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly.
No,
I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day, it looked like they had some rough, bad people. Neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this. There are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment. But there are two sides to the country. Does anybody have a final? Does anybody have? You have an infrastructure.
What makes you think you can get an infrastructure bill? You didn't get health care.
Well, you know, I'll tell you. We came very close with health care. Unfortunately, John McCain decided to vote against it at the last minute. You'll have to ask John McCain why he did that. But we came very close to health care. We will end up getting health care. But we'll get the infrastructure, and actually infrastructure is something that I think we'll have bipartisan support on. I actually think Democrats will go along with the infrastructure.
President, have you spoken to the family? Have you spoken to the family of the victim of the car attack?
No, I'll be reaching out. When will you
be reaching out?
I was very, I thought that the statement put out, the mother's statement, I thought was a beautiful statement. I always tell you, it was something that I really appreciated. I thought it was terrific, and really under the kind of stress that she's under and the heartache that she's under, I thought putting out that statement to me was really something I won't forget. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Any political violence should be not denounced, and he quite frankly did it very clearly, but he still was attacked by this, by the media and many other people. And Justin Trudeau basically said the absolute same thing. He denounced both sides of this attack, but he didn't get criticized. But Trump did, and he said the exact same thing. Then we have the communist Jeremy Corbyn in Great Britain. In the Venezuelan conflict, he said, well, both are at fault, both the people and the government. And he got away with it. And the government shoots the people and the people starve to death. It's freaking sick. But that's communism. But it's funny to see the communist people that said that Venezuela was a haven for communism. And just look at the rot-infested place. I mean, I have even heard reports of people eating zoo animals because they're starving so much. And people starve to death on the streets. You know, that's communism in a nutshell. But you might ask, why is this not in China if you say that communism is so bad for the economy? Well, the thing is, they have robbed the people many times, but the real reason why they are getting away with this economically is because of their vast resources spread along their country. I mean, they have the most precious minerals that we use for our cell phones. I mean, I remember as a kid, when I was looking at toys, everything was made from China. And how many products have you seen that is made from China or made in America? I think most of them was made from China, am I correct? Yes, they have a huge production in China, unlike any other country. Every single country in the world wants to trade with China. America does that, even though Trump doesn't like China. South America trades with China. Middle East trades with China. Africa trades with China. Eastern Asian countries trade with China. Europe trades with China. Russia trades with China. Who doesn't trade with China? I mean, the Chinese are getting so fat with this. That's why they have the most billionaires in the world. I'm pretty sure it's China. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure they have the majority of the billionaires in the world. And oops, every now and then some of them just disappear and are found dead or something else. Ugh. Who knows? Probably the government wanting to collect. But regardless, you remember, Trump didn't announce this, but it wasn't enough. So he denounced this the day after again and signified the groups. He named them, the Antifa, the KKK, and etc. He named all of those groups. But it's funny that these so-called Democrats are so much against racism because they helped found groups like the KKK and many other of these racist groups in the past. And well, of course, this George Soros in modern time are funding these groups. And they are all saying the same things, that Trump is a racist and all of these things, yet they found these types of groups. And it's quite funny that they are claiming that they're not racist, they are from the minority groups, but their politics have always been about race. But in the earlier times, their politics was more hateful towards the immigrant groups, etc., the people from different descents. But now, it's about hating the white people and making sure that these minority groups will feel victimized. So, still racial politics. They're still gonna be pure out racists, but they're gonna still bash the racist track. I mean, it's just a racism in a different form. But you can't be, of course, racist toward a white person, so that's why they're getting away with this. But one incredible thing in the video they showed was that she asked, why aren't Donald Trump uniting and rallying against people? What should Americans unite to rally against? I don't think Americans want to unite to rally against something. I think they want to unify for something. I think Americans really want to become builders. I think the American dream is to live free and have the chance to reach the top in the world if they work hard and makes a good living. Have a family, watch the baseball game, all those classical stuff. I don't think Americans want to go to war. I think they want to fight for their freedom. But I really think what the American wants to do is to unite to be a free America, to be America that doesn't need to be censored, that have to be governed by tyrants and people that will tell you what to think and what to feel. I don't think America really wants this crazed lunatic liberals that are literally trying to adopt the Antifa's methods. I think they are tired of that. And people are waking up to this more and more because you hear from these libertarians that they are leaving the left. like they left the left because the right is right. The regressive left. You probably heard these terms already, but it's worth noting that people are getting tired of it, even people on the left. But I really think that Trump really shouldn't care too much about what the media says, because no matter what he says, they will constantly demonize him, even though he says good things. But this has already been predicted, that the right extremists would rise up, because the left are constantly attacking the right. The left, the right, the left, the right, the left, the right. I mean, before you could have conversations with people, left and right ideologies, thoughts, conservatives and liberals. But now it's like insane asylum. Do you even utter a right thought? Then you're gonna get harassed to death. I mean, the left are working to silence the right, while the right is working for freedom of speech. I think the biggest thing that unites people on the right are freedom of speech, non-violent protests, and intellectual diversity, rather than the left sterile, monotoned, monolithic ideology of leftism, socialism. It's just bonkers that people will never learn that socialism is constantly failing. Though personally, I'm not American, so I don't have the American values living in this immigrant country, because I'm a tribalist, you know. I live in Sweden. I don't want people to come here from Africa and populate our country. I don't want people from Asia, North Korea, and wherever there will be war in the Middle East. I want to live with my people, but I have seen how bad it is with immigration. I mean, I live in an Arab ghetto, so I don't even get to see Swedish people most of the time when I get out. And sometimes when I go out, I even only hear Arabic. I don't even hear Swedish when I go out. And that's the price of multiculturalism. And I have to pay for it, while rich people can live in their nice white neighborhoods. So I get why people would want to protest, because when you take people in like this, then they won't assimilate well into the country, and, well, people do feel attacked on the right, constantly. Though personally, I don't want to live in a multiculturalism at all. I don't want to live in a multi-ethnic society. But I dare say it. And I'm not a racist, because I know that I'm not a racist. You have to ask yourself, am I a racist? Because they will label you as a racist just to silence you. You can't let them silence you by being called a racist. And it's so impressive that people are standing up to these bullies. I heard InfoWars are going to help some other YouTubers, black conservatives, that got demonetized on YouTube because they dare to talk positive things about Trump.
They're lying in their rules. They're saying they're open and free, but if you're not a mainline establishment liberal, you're not welcome.
That's exactly what we see. That's right. That's how we feel. That's how YouTube is making us feel. Because we're black, we're conservative, we're Republicans, and we are loyal supporters to the president. That's right. And now it's a problem.
Well, I'm looking into the best discrimination, antitrust lawyers, and I'm giving you my commitment that we're going to find the lawyers. I'm going to sue them. I would like you to join with me as plaintiffs. Paul Watson's going to be involved as well, because we need to get this out in court. We need to, this is bullying. This is the shutdown of free speech. And I mean, this is so un-American. This is so dangerous.
And this happens to many other black conservatives. For example, black conservative teachers can't get to teach, get a job, because they're conservative. So they're not really a black person. But you hear the craziness of all of these things. And if you look back on Europe's history, in Sweden 1930, we didn't have Muslims. But now, in the 2017, as I speak today, we have 55 no-go zones. Over 200,000 people lives in them. And these are created by the jihad. It has been revealed in documents that they were intending to create these zones to stage their operations within the countries and recruit people. And we are totally 3,000 Muslims in the country. And the violence, the rapes, the murders have just gone up skyrocketing. skyrocketing. Sweden, it didn't used to be that much violence. I mean, I asked my father, etc., and he said, well, you know, it wasn't that much when I was young. It used to be a murder here and there. So you can imagine, like the old generation, they're like, what are people doing? And I mean, lots of old people are voting for the Swedish Democrats because they see that the direction Sweden has gone is horrible. So they can't stand, and especially when they are just increasing taxes, and at least the Swedish Democrats are trying to be nice to them. And in fact, the Swedish Democrats wants to remove the tax for old people, which is a huge thing. But if we look to the rest of Europe, how was it when my father was young? How was it at the 50s? Was there Muslim terrorism going on here in Europe? Not that I have heard of, but if it was, not in the extent that it is now. And this is the thing we should realize, that when we import people from different cultures, multiculturalism, as people say, it's such a good thing for diversity, it's culturally enriching, it certainly isn't. It's just adding problems rather than adding benefits to the countries. And it's cost a heavy sum. But criticizing these things is racist. We have to stop labeling people. We have to start to be able to have a conversation. I mean, it's like if you're gonna talk with someone in the left, or in the right, or a centrist, or a environmental dude, whatever they may identify as. Basically, people need to start a conversation, talk about something, and not just get stuck on one question. For example, if I ask a guy a question like, how do you feel about Trump's new regulations on taxes? And the other guy is gonna say, well, I don't like it because if he lowers the taxes, the poor will not get as much welfare. And then I will be arguing with him that it's better with lower taxes for us working people, and we will start more competition and get more people into work. And then he's gonna be back at it again and tell me how much it would benefit everyone in the country, not just the rich and powerful. And then I will argue that that isn't the case at all. And eventually we would just stand there and repeat the same things over and over, not making any sense. But rather than just getting stuck on this point, why can't we say, okay, I understand what you say. I mean, it's not like you're supposed to tell the person what to think and what to feel, but you can try to tell him what you think and then just move on. Why can't people do this anymore? It's an important thing that people need to discuss. And that's why I love the Rubin report so damn much, because he's a classical liberal, the last liberal, as he likes to say, and he likes to take in people like Milo Yiannopoulos, who had his rally attacked when he was supposed to have the free speech, which is horrible because he's a gay man, and they come like people are homophobes and stuff like that. Well, that's sort of homophobic, but he's this infamous right-wing provocateur, so to say. So yeah, he's okay to attack. But actually, this demonetization thing that has been going on, I think he sued the people that removed his income for the book, because they have been basically attacking and hounding anyone supporting right-wing media, even shutting down things like Patreons, the alternative when Google doesn't want to give you money because you're racist or whatever on YouTube. So it's interesting to see that people are actually starting to file lawsuits back against these people that are constantly harassing and attacking them, rather than just, all right, let me move over here then and have this conversation with this other person instead. Because this is just going to continue until they will have no economical source, and they will just be out of jobs and not be able to do this on their work times. And it's not like they're going to get any other job because they will be so hated by the mainstream media. You can't cower and bow down to these extremists that will tell you what to think and what to feel, because if you do, then it will be monolithic in the future. There will only be one totalitarian ideology that everyone will have to follow. Also, I must add before I will end the video is that I think the guy on the video, he made a remark about Trump not being perhaps clear enough. I don't remember his exact words now. But like I said, Trump even came the day after, and I think this may have been before that. But I don't think you have to be that particular. I think people understand what the extremism is. For example, our politicians back here in Europe should perhaps consider that when Islamic terror is going on, that they should not be so dismissive of them and constantly blame the right for doing attacks, because it's so sickening. I mean, how many Islamic terrorist attacks haven't there been this year compared to right-wing attacks? So why are they constantly harassing those that commits the minority of the attacks rather than those that commits the majority of the crimes? But you get my point. It's like they're so extremely high while right-wing terrorism is so low. But it's not like I'm being an apologist for these people on the right. It's like, yeah, when you do something bad, then you have to pay for it. It's of course. I think everyone understands that. Even I understand that. I don't attack people for having different opinions. But I have been attacked many times in my life. And whenever I report it, it's, like, whatever. No one cares about you. So that's basically the underlining. I understand how much the right is being attacked. So I don't think I need to add to that flavor. But it's like in any case, if someone will do something bad and I think someone is underreporting it, I will report it. For example, if the left would stop being left extremists and they will learn their lesson from all of this, and the Islamic terrorism and Islam would disband, or Islam would reform to something much greater than what it is now, because right now it's a complete mess. It's promoting terrorism, etc. That's what is in the Quran. It says that you can kill people. Then I would for sure go after the Nazis, etc. because I've seen a lot of stupid things that they say, and it's very sickening to my gut. But more over that in some other video, because I feel like I've been talking about this for quite some time. But hopefully I have made some sense to you. And if I haven't, then I'm sorry, my friends. I tried my best. And of course, I want to congratulate myself for my 26th birthday. And we should promote nationalism, not globalism, because nationalism has nothing to do with the right. It has nothing to do with the left. If you are in a country and you wave your flag, you're a nationalist. It's that simple. It's you honoring the nation you are in. You're honoring the people you are next to. You're glad that you're within a nation. A nation doesn't mean that it has to be tribalistic with race. For example, like in America, it's a nation. However, it's a very split nation in many divides, because I can clearly say that during Obama's reign, it was shattered into 1,000 pieces. And it's gonna be hard to pick those pieces up and put them back together. But the thing is that people constantly try to challenge power. People will constantly try to subvert and change the order in order to gain power. And they will do anything, even destroy your peaceful life and take away your liberties, your homeland, and everything you have in your life. Even your family will they try to attack in order to get and stay in power. But this is where I'll take my leave.